Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I just wanted to do a quick tier list. Without going too much into detail, I wanted to give an overview about why I thought each of the characters are good or not so good and where they kind of fit in relation to each other. Um, so hopefully this can shed some insight into why I use certain characters or why I think certain characters are good or not, and hopefully I can have start the discussion about other people's opinions about some of the characters, and we can have some discussion down in the comments. So to start off, we have Benedict. I think he's an A tier unit for a couple of reasons. His support abilities are quite good. Now twofold turn and dragon shield. He starts the map with 4 TP, while everybody else starts with 3. So that puts him a little bit ahead. That means with just one extra TP from Julio or Medina, he can use 2 of his 3 TP support abilities in a row, which is quite good. And then he has surprisingly high defense for a support unit, so he can sort of play a role as an off tank. The reason he's not S tier is because he needs help keeping up his TP. If he had some way to support himself as far as his own TP, he would be S tier, but I think A tier is a good spot for him. He is very good. He's an asset to every team that he's on, but he's not game breaking by himself. So that's what A tier is. It's mainly for units who are good on any team, but they usually need a little bit of help, and they don't single handedly take control of a map. Okay. So Frederica, I think Frederica is an S tier unit. What she does is she does damage, and lots of it. Probably more damage than just about any other unit in the game. She has the highest magic attack in the game. She has a clear skies bonus that gives her an extra 10 to 15% extra damage in clear skies. So she hits in general harder than every other mage in the game by a solid like 10 to 15% when you consider her extra magic attack and clear skies. Then she has Sunfall, which is the reason I have her in S tier, in addition to all her damage. That ability, it does take a little bit of help to set it up, but it can literally win a map on its own in one turn. Uh, if you hit the majority of the threatening enemy units with Sunfall, they're all going to be at like 25 to 30% health and just easy to mop up with your other units, either with other AoEs or just regular attacks. That wins maps on its own, and her damage ability is what makes her S tier. She single-handedly can gain control of a map with minimal help, so to me that is S tier. Um, Roland, I had him in A tier. He's a very good, melee DPS unit. He's got excellent mobility. He's an excellent flanker. He can do very good AoE damage, especially to enemies that are lined up, but he also has very good single target spike damage. He's a little bit more frail than some of the other melee units, but his movement helps keep him out of danger. He does like to miss sometimes at inopportune moments, but it's not a game breaking issue for him. So he's another excellent unit, asset to any team that he's on. But Roland also doesn't single-handedly take control of maps. Like he needs some help keeping his TP up to use his AoE abilities or to use 4 dragons. And he does damage, but he doesn't do as much damage as like Frederica, to where in one turn she could win you the game. So that's why I have him in A tier. Gila, very good healer. She has good AoE heal, good single target heal, and she has Miraculous Light, which is amazing. It's essentially a auto revive that you can basically put a resurrection earring on any unit for 4 TP. One downside she does have is that if you heal with her every turn, she can never actually build TP towards using Miraculous Light. If she had some way to generate TP, she would be S tier, but because she doesn't, I have her in A. Excellent unit on any team that she's on, but she also is not gonna win you maps on her own. Anna is also an A tier unit, extremely versatile. Her biggest uh, asset is the fact that she goes twice. She can poison two things and run away. She can go invisible and use items while she's invisible. She can heal while she's invisible. She can set up fires in one turn by herself, which is really good and combos pretty well with Frederica. If you two full turn her, she can attack 4 times. Deadly Blaze can diva up a boss. She's really good. She's borderline S tier just because of some of the shenanigans she can do, and how versatile she is. But I don't think she wins or takes control of maps by herself. Um, so that's why I also have her here. But she's gonna be good on any team that she's on. Um, Now Eridor I think is the next S tier unit. This guy is incredible. I mean, he's on like 90% of my teams, and honestly, most teams that I see people use Eridor is on, and it's for a reason. Um, he just tanks all melee damage. Crowd controls for your team. King's Shield can keep him invincible for a large portion of the map. So when I'm talking about tiers here, I'm talking about the units used at their the maximum, as optimally as possible, with good support from their teammates, right? So the maximum output you can get out of a unit in a team comp, and I think Eridor's maximum output is S tier. You can literally keep him invincible for the entire map, king shielding enemies and taunting them. That's ridiculous. Even if you don't do that, he can provoke for 1 TP, which is very good. He can king shield occasionally. Um, his only weakness is mages, but if you fury them, they can't even do anything to him. So he does take control of maps by himself. If there's no mages on the map and you have Eridor, you pretty much win right away. Even if there are mages with a little bit of strategy, even that is not a big issue for him. So S tier unit for me. Huette I think is an S tier unit. I think all the archers in this game are good, but she's just slightly better than all the other ones. The reason for that is her versatility. So she doesn't do as much damage as like Archibald, but she does good damage. She doesn't have as much range as Archibald, but she has very good range. And she has blind and shadow stitching arrow, where she can blind enemies and root them in place, which is just incredible utility. Her weapon skill is similar to Archibald's inescapable arrow. In addition to all the other stuff that she has, then she has great movement. So archers want to be on high ground, and she can get high ground instantly, and then just start blinding things and mobilizing things. And she's really good. She can actually win maps on her own. If you are twofold turning her and double blinding things, if you are feeding her TP and using Shadow Stitch and Shooting Star, I mean, she can win you maps on her own. So I think, and she literally can actually solo some maps if you just fly up on her roof and nothing can reach you. So, yeah, to me that does qualify as S tier. I do think she's the best archer in the game. Now, Corinton, also an S tier unit. I think he is slightly better than Frederica as a mage. While he doesn't do quite as much damage, he can do a lot of the same things. He's got excellent AoE, excellent single target. He can silence things. Frederica can reduce their movement, which is also quite good, but Corinton kind of does that naturally with ice, so that's good as well. He can put invulnerability shields on teammates. He can make walls of ice, and he also has a very good AoE spell in Glacial Moon, which you can spam if you feed him TP. Both of these are very good. I think Corinton's utility, though, puts him slightly ahead. Also, his TP regeneration is slightly more consistent than Frederica's. He just needs to stand on ice, which he can generate for himself, and as long as your team isn't pushing aggressively, he can very easily keep himself on ice, and if you do that, he's got the best TP regeneration of any mage in the game. So yeah, he's definitely S tier, and he can also win maps on his own. Either from, if you're feeding him TP, you can just spamming Shield of Ice on your teammates can win you a map. Then he can also spam Glacial Moon and do lots of AoE damage, and These two mages are great. They combo together really well, and both of them can win maps for you, um, almost by themselves. So S tier unit. Uh, Rudolph, A tier, great unit. He's extremely versatile archer. He's got good single target. He's got good AOE. He has traps to shut down bosses and make choke points. Um, he also, if you use him in such a way that he is able to stay still, because one weakness that he does have is he has relatively low accuracy for an archer. But if he's staying, if he's not moving, he gets bonus accuracy and luck, and it's like +8. I mean, it's a huge boost. On top of that, he gets extra speed if he defeats an enemy, so he can get an extra +8 speed as well, which means he's going to be going, acting much more often. So if you can get him to a spot where he doesn't have to move much, suddenly he's very accurate. His luck goes up, so he can hit an occasional crit, and his speed goes up as well. In addition to the fact that he has good single target damage, good AOE damage, and he can put things to sleep too. So he's just an extremely versatile unit that also does good damage. Definitely an asset on any team that he's on. Serenoa, I think, is A tier. He's a jack of all trades, but everything he does is good. I think he's borderline S tier. Uh, every single one of his abilities are good. Like I said, he also has pretty good stats. He's a good bruiser. He also has excellent strength, tied for the best in the game. Good accuracy, solid speed, and the highest luck in the game. So he hits a lot of random crits. He also is really good. You know what? I think Sereno is S tier. Um, he's also really good with follow up attacks. And he has Honor Convictions Banner, which if you use that at the start of a map, the reason I'm putting him into S tier is because of Honor Convictions Banner. If you can feed him 1 TP and use this, suddenly your whole team starts with 4 TP. That means everybody has access to their weapon skills right away for the most part. That ability to start off that strong snowballs really hard. And for that reason, like that really can win you maps on its own. That's like Eridor starts with King's Shield, Cornton starts with Glacial Moon, Gila can put res on someone right away. I mean, it really can. It definitely can win maps for you. So I'm gonna put him in S tier for that reason. And he does good damage, and he always has something useful to do every turn. He can do good single target, good AOE. He can delay enemies, which can set up your teammates to take them out or protect a teammate from dying. He can use shielding stance on a tank like Eridor to hold a choke point, or any unit that is in danger just to cut their damage in half. And then Under Conviction's Banner as well, and the follow up attacks where he does extra damage with follow up attacks, and because of his passive that gives him extra strength when he's near his team, he's doing even more damage with those follow up attacks. So yeah, I think he's an S tier unit. Julio, S tier. Um, while he doesn't win maps by himself directly, he indirectly does. He kind of snowballs, helps your team snowball, much like Serenoa. The amount of TP he's able to feed your teammates just makes a huge difference. It means mages are using higher cost spells. Um, he also can damage boost them too. It means your team overall is doing more damage using higher cost abilities more often, and he's can contribute to damage, and he's tanky because of some of the abilities that he has. He's either he or Medina are pretty much essential on every team, so that tells you how good they are. And yeah, your team will dramatically improve its performance with Julio on it versus without him. So that to me indirectly is him helping you take control of a map because of the snowball effect, just like with Serenoa. Um, all right, the next unit, Hasabara. So this unit is the first one that we've gotten to that I really don't think is that great. Now she's not bad, okay. I mean she's still a usable unit, but I put her in a C tier because I almost never use her. Not that she's bad. There's just always a better option. If her kit actually isn't terrible. I mean she can heal, she can do some AOE damage, she can push things off ledges. She has desperate defense, so she can actually be a pretty tanky under half health. and she does more damage with more TP. Um, and she can get extra TP by moving around the map at least 5 squares each turn. So that's all pretty good, and she can move your teammates around with catapult. But it's just there's always seems to be another unit that's better than her for whatever. She's a generalist, but not good enough at any one thing to where she really helps you win a map more so than any other unit, if that makes sense. And for that reason, that's why I really don't use her very much. Like Serenoa's a generalist, but he has something good to do every single turn and can snowball the map for you. Hasabara definitely does not really snowball maps at all. Her healing is worse than all the other healers. Her damage is okay, but nothing to write home about. So I don't know. She has a hard time fitting into team comps, and that's why I put her in C tier. Narv, he's between A and B for me. I think I would put Narv in A tier, and here's why. Um, he's not as good as these two mages for sure, but he has by far the longest range on any of his spells, other than their ultimate spells, right? That have a range of 6. But Narv's basic spells effectively have a range of 6. And his Whirlwind has a huge AoE. His Mystic Beam has a range of 7. So if you can get enemies lined up, you can do huge damage with Mystic Beam. He's got good single target spike with Spark. That can also has a low chance to paralyze, and he can set up puddles by himself that he can abuse with his lightning. The reason he's not S tier is because he has no way to generate his own TP, and that drops him like a tier or two because you have to feed him TP, otherwise he's gonna have downturns. Um, Whereas these two mages can support themselves a lot better because they have abilities that generate TP. Um, yeah, so he I still think he's an A tier unit, but he's like barely A tier. But he's always good every time I use him. But I just feel like while he's an asset, oh, and he can heal, so that does keep him in A tier in my opinion because he just that level of versatility, where he can do good damage and heal, and he can lower enemies' magic defense for your other mages to combo off of. So that combo I think is worthy of A tier, but he does have a big flaw where that keeps him from being S tier. All right. Next we have Jens. Jens is a solid A tier unit for me. I really don't use him that much, but when I do use him, he's very good. His spring traps are obviously very good. He can knock bosses off ledges. He can build ladders that you can abuse. He's quite good, but most of the time I'm not using him. He's not winning maps necessarily on his own. I mean, you can with some gimmicks, but most of the time he's not, and he's not doing much damage. You have to protect him from mages. He definitely has some big downsides that keep him from being S tier, in my opinion. But what he does well, he does do really well. His spring traps are second to none, and him comboed with Rudolph, setting up traps can really be a nuisance to the enemy. But the difference is Rudolph can contribute to damage too, whereas Jens really doesn't. But Jens is better at setting traps and can build ladders. So I think they're both, in the same tier for that reason. Lionel, I think, is S tier. So Lionel is another really, really strong crowd control unit. He is by far the best mage shutdown unit in the game. I mean, he can put he's got endless speech, which hits in a 2x2 AOE, and just or a 4x4 AOE. It hits in a cross shape, and it puts enemies to sleep or slumbers them, both of which shut down mages. So if either of those hit, the mages are shut down. You can shut down 4 mages, or actually 5 mages, with one ability if they were all next to each other. Then he's got a ranged 100% Fury, which is very, very strong. Also shuts down mages, but can also shut down melee units. Lionel can just run away from them, and they'll keep chasing him and never catch him. But the reason he's S tier is that on top of all of that, which is very good, but what I think would have normally kept him in A tier, he also has Golden Opportunity, which is just it's one of the best abilities in the game. You don't have to use it very much, but the cost is not that expensive in the end game, and this is an end game tier list. And the cost is not that. I mean, you could use it once per map and not really feel it in the end game, and that's huge. That ability can literally win a map for you on its own. In addition to all the other stuff that he has, I think he's definitely an S tier unit. He does have poor movement, so that does hold him back. But I usually try to fix that up with a movement bangle or with birds of prey, and he does fine. And he's pretty tanky, so if enemies chase him down and do catch him, he can take a hit or two. So he's a very very solid unit. Definitely S tier in my opinion. Picoletta, not a unit I use that much. She is good for her decoys, but I think she's a B tier unit. So B tier for me is situationally good. So while these guys are good just about all the time, but have some sort of flaw that's keeping them back from being S tier, she is only situationally good in my opinion. So she does a really good job at distracting enemies with her decoys, but that's really the only thing she has going for her, and she needs a little bit of help keeping up enough TP to do that. But she can do that really well, and decoys are really good to the point where that alone makes her a solid unit on most maps. Um, Her in conjunction with another tank can just do really really excellent crowd control. If her decoys were 2 TP or she had a way to regenerate TP, she'd be A tier in my opinion. But because she has a lot of turns where she's sometimes not doing much, unless you're feeding her a lot of TP, yeah, I don't think she quite makes it into A tier. But she's like on the borderline. She's quite good. I don't use her that much though, just because usually there's other options for crowd control like Lionel or Eridor or both or Milo, which we'll get to. So she's good, but not quite A tier in my opinion. Now Medina is SS tier. So SS is game breaking to the point where putting this unit on your team just completely changes the way your team functions and makes it exponentially more effective. And that's Medina. I mean, she just is just an insane battery. She combos with Julio for even more insanity. I did make a video on that if you want to check it out. But basically, her by herself single handedly can keep your team fed with enough TP. And if you combine that with Julio, like your team is just like overflowing with TP. I mean, you can spam abilities left and right and not even have to worry about it. And not only that, she can also turn accelerate, essentially using Benedict's now skill for one less TP, which is insane as well. She does cost money, but in the end game, you have so much money that that's not really an issue. Um, and so yeah, and on top of that, she also has a huge map wide AOE heal, which while it's not that useful, it can save you in a pinch. If none of your healers can reach a unit that's about to die, or if you have several units, you have too many units injured for your healers to take care of, and they're too spread out, you can use Medina's AOE heal to kind of give everybody a little bit of extra health to maybe survive, on top of all the other stuff that she has going for her. So yeah, I think she's a game breaking unit, SS tier. Um, Zana, I think, is A tier. I think she's pretty equal to Narv. So what she does well, she does better than Narv, but Narv does everything else better. So she has extremely strong single target spike damage with Rite of Lightning, and she can boost that damage further with Rite of by starting Rain, and the Rain will create puddles for her too. But um, she doesn't really do anything else on a level that would make her like S tier. She has that one thing that she does extremely well, but that one thing is so good that I think it qualifies for A tier. She basically does high damage and has a 60% chance to paralyze on top of that, which is huge. And if you set up puddles for her, she has a pretty good chance to paralyze as well, relative to Narv. But Narv does everything else better. So that's why I think Narv is on the same level as Izana. Um, but she's very good mage overall. It's just that she can't generate TP in any way. So you have to feed her TP in the same way you have to feed Narv TP. So that's what's keeping them out of S tier. Archibald, I think, is a good A tier unit. He does really high damage and has really high range. So the one downside for Rudolph is that his range is never really, he can't get any higher than the standard range. Um, he doesn't really have any like abilities that increase his range, whereas the other two archers all usually have at least one extra range on their normal attacks. Um, so unless he's on high ground, he's not hitting more than 4 squares away. And even if he is, his range is shorter than the other two archers. Archibald has extreme range, with his normal attacks having plus 1 to 6 range. And then he also has Inescapable Arrow, which basically hits the whole map. And you can use that almost every turn if you keep feeding him TP. Downside to him, he doesn't have much AoE. He's frail. He has poor movement. Um, you can patch up his movement a bit, but it's still always going to be worse than someone like Hewitt or even Rudolph. Um, his AoE, like I said, is not very good. But a sudden death, so any unit under 50% health, he has a chance to just kill them, and that is a very real boost to his damage. That means, especially when you consider his range, I mean, he can really pick enemies off from far away. You know, if you have a team that's doing a bunch of AoE damage, let's say you Sunfall and everything is low now, you can like twofold turn Archibald, shoot two things, and potentially kill both of them. You know what I mean? Just with normal attacks. Then he's also got he can ignore armor. He's got an ultra weapon skill where he can essentially do Roland's four dragons because it ignores armor, but it can hit up to 10 units in a line. Now he has to charge it, which is a real downside, but it although I personally don't use it that much, the potential for the damage from this skill is actually huge. Um, it's basically it's almost like four dragons except it can hit more units. Now you usually won't crit with it, so four dragons is gonna do more damage on average, but four dragons only hits one unit where you can hit 10 with Archibalds. Um, then he also has Edged Arrow, which while it doesn't do nearly as much damage as four dragons, it also ignores armor. So he just does tons and tons of damage at the expense of relatively poor AOE and relatively poor movement. But all the archers are good. All of them are, except for one other than that we're about to get to. But these three archers are all good, and Hewitt's probably slightly better, but they're all excellent units. Cordelia is definitely A tier. She's the best pure healer in the game. It really you can't really compete with her. As far as just healing HP, she's definitely the best. Her heals heal more than Gila's. She regenerates TP on her own. She can use regen, so even if nothing needs to be healed, she can just throw that on a unit, and it'll heal them over time and just kind of make them tankier. Above and Beyond is extremely strong. It's I would say equivalent to Miraculous Light, but one advantage it does have is it can be stacked infinitely, whereas Miraculous Light you can only have it once on any one unit. The other thing is that she generates her own TP, so she can heal or put down regen and still build TP towards Above and Beyond. So, and with certain strategies with her, with self-sacrifice, she can really build a lot of TP. Like you can put regen on her with a Bangle of Vitality, and all of a sudden, she can use self-sacrifice every turn for free, and that means that she's building 2 TP per turn while healing, right? Which means she can use Above and Beyond every other turn. Then, that's just huge value. The only downside to her is that if you're trying to push aggressively, you can't take advantage of her TP regeneration. Um, and so, but that's the only issue with her. Now, she also has more range than Gila as well. Up to 7 range with self sacrifice, which is insane. And then 6 range with everything else. So, whereas Gila has 5 range. And that does definitely come up sometimes. So, they're both good because the difference is Gila can also cure status and haste things, whereas Cordelia really can only just heal, but she heals extremely well, and she can heal even if everything is full health, basically, which is huge, because most of the time healers aren't doing much if the whole team is full health and they don't have their ultimates available, but she can because she can put regen on things. She can regen herself to set up self-sacrifice in the future, and she can overheal things even if they're at full health, and it stacks infinitely, so you can get units up to like thousands of health. So Definitely A tier, but not quite S tier because no healer, I don't think, single handedly wins you a map on her own. Although she kind of can with Above and Beyond. If you spam it enough, like she can make your units so tanky that it's impossible to lose. But she's probably like an A plus tier if I had one. But I'm gonna keep her at A for the moment. Travis, B tier, situationally good. So he is actually quite good. The problem with him though is that all the other melee units are just probably a little bit better. What he does well, he does he can do good single target damage and set up combos with other melee units with backward toss, and he can delay up to 3 enemies in a row with impending strike. The problem is enemies aren't always lined up with impending strike to do the maximum effect, and if they're not, delaying strike is just straight up better. His weapon skill is just really not that good. It requires a charge, but unlike Frederica's, it doesn't do nearly as much damage. And he has to be right up next to the enemies, which means he's going to be taking damage, whereas Frederica can be far away and does way more damage with hers than his. So, yeah, he's okay, but all the other melee units I think are just a little bit better at what they do. So he has a hard time fitting in the teams, but he is situationally good. I mean, if you wanted to make a team built around delaying things, Travis and Serrano together could really do a good job of that. And he's pretty tanky with steel back and pretty good HP and defense. So situationally good. Trish, I think, is C tier. So earlier I said all the archers were good. She's the exception. I really can't justify ever using Trish. Every time I use her, when I'm forced to, like if you do Golden Route, I always wish I had a different archer. There's not a whole lot going for her. The only thing she has over the other archers is her speed, but she can't even do that much with her speed. Like she can get 30 plus speed, through her skill tree and everything, but she also has poor accuracy. And her abilities aren't that good. I mean, she has Flaming Arrow, but other than that, she doesn't have much going for her. If Flaming Arrow was 1 TP, she'd jump probably at least 1 tier or 2. But 2 TP is a bit much for that, especially when her big gimmick, Act Again, eats a turn to use it. So, like, it's hard for her to act twice in a turn while using Flaming Arrow. So she has to use normal attacks. But her normal attacks are nothing to write home about. So, I don't know. I think Trish is just in a weird spot where all the other archers are much better. So she has a real hard time ever getting into a team. So that's why she's C tier. I can't even say she's situationally good because she can leap up to heights, but Huette just naturally flies up there. So I mean, really, I can't justify using her. So she's C tier. Milo is another S tier unit. So Milo is insane. Sure, just Power of Love alone makes her S tier. That can win maps on its own. You can start off a map, pump a little bit of TP into Milo, have her moon jump in, do Power of Love, then in tandem her, Battle Cry, Power of Love again. Now you have up to 10 units tempted right at the start of the map. That definitely can snowball and allow you to take control of the map instantly. That's S tier. Not only that, if you feed her TP, like if you run Medina and Julio together, you can use Power of Love every turn, which is huge. Then she's got really high evasion, good magic defense, and all her other skills are good too. If you think about Milo's kit, she can poison things, she can hit things for magical damage, she can drain TP, which can straight up shut down mages. So without even tempting them, she can just run up to them and drain their TP so they can never use a spell. And she'll keep gaining TP while she does that because it steals her TP and gives it to her. She can also paralyze things in an AoE with Stardust. But most of the time, you're going to be using either her single target tempt or Power of Love. And those two alone make her S tier, in addition to all her evasion and magic defense and poison. Yeah, she's S tier. She can take control of maps on her own. Maxwell, I think he is the second S tier melee unit. So what makes him so good? He does incredibly good AoE damage with high jump, and he does not quite as much as the mages do, but he is much tankier than they are. Whereas with mages can literally get one shot under the right circumstances on hard mode, Maxwell is like twice as tanky as your average melee DPS because he has a built-in revive in his kit. And then with hydra, he also has TP sustain in his kit too, so he can generate an extra TP for himself by hitting multiple enemies with his spear or with throwing items, or he can even heal his teammates if they're both have if two of your teammates are actually damaged, you can throw a ranged pellet at them, heal them, and it'll also trigger two birds one stone. So he can kind of sustain his own TP that way. And then if you high jump, it effectively makes high jump only 4 TP instead of 5, because you would never high jump to hit one unit, right? So if you high jump and hit at least 2 units, which you always will, that means he only needs 4 more TP to get the next high jump off, and he'll naturally get 1. So if you can feed him 3 TP in a turn, you can use high jump every single turn, and that's not that hard to do if you run double battery. Even if you don't, he's using high jump pretty often just naturally through his own ability to generate TP. Um, you can also, you can jump in with high jump, then in tandem him, battle cry, high jump again. That can win maps. That can win some maps. Similar to what Quarantine can do, but the difference is just the tankiness of Maxwell. The other thing is that if you stack revives on him, I mean, you can play hyper aggressively with him. Like, you give him a res ring or you put a Gila res on him, now you can just run in, high jump, and just don't even worry about it. He's not gonna die, permanently, because he has like 3 or 4 lives at any one time. You can stack all that with a Plume of Immortality too, which you could do on any unit, but he uses it better because he has that built-in natural revive. So his durability in conjunction with his high AoE damage and solid single target damage and good movement, because he has traverse for 1 TP where he can get up to high ground or move a few extra spaces to get into position. He can also use essentially Roland's rush ability for a similar TP cost to help with movement as well. So he's great. He's a little bit more durable than Roland, but doesn't have quite as much single target damage. But he still does very good single target damage, and he is extremely durable and does great damage. He can definitely take control of maps if you're using him and spamming high jump, and with him being as durable as he is, you can just throw him into a bunch of enemies and distract them for the rest of your team. And that level of like combination of damage, durability, and essentially crowd control, because all the enemies will go after him, definitely makes him S tier in my opinion. Flanagan, I think Flanagan's A tier. People give him a bad rap, but he's actually excellent. So he doesn't try to do what Eridor does. He tries to buff your teammates to make them all tanky instead of necessarily trying to tank himself. But he can tank himself as well. And he can also Fury things, even though his Fury is single target, but it's 90%. So he can maintain Fury on 2 things. He has Rampart, which is insane. It cuts damage on 4 units around him by 50%. This is extremely good with squishy units like mages in your backline. He can also put shielding stance on things to have their damage. And then he regens TP on his own every turn. The only reason he's not S tier is, unlike Eridor, he doesn't like self-retaliate. So a lot of times he's just sitting there not doing anything other than tanking. And also because he's usually in your back line, he's far away from enemies. So all he does is sit there and tank. But he does that extremely well. So all you have to do to maintain Rampart with him is get 1 extra TP every 3 turns. And that's not hard to do at all. And that can win maps on its own. I mean, he's almost, when used to his optimal level and on the right maps, he is an S tier unit, but not every map warrants his use. So he's not as effective on every map, which is why I think he's A tier. But he, on maps like Vlor's Assault, where you have to hold a point, he is an S tier unit on that map. And I'll definitely show that in the playthrough. Gruma, I think, is a B tier unit. She's not bad. She's a dodge tank. She can dodge reliably and she can Fury things. But her Fury is only close range. She can paralyze things, but the hit rate is not that good. And she actually has good range on her melee attacks too, and has single target spike. She's kind of in the same boat as Travis, to where she is a good melee unit, but all the other melee units are just a bit better. Like, I don't know why you would really want to use Groma over Roland or Maxwell or the next character we're about to talk about. But she's good and situationally good, and so I think B tier is fair for her. She's not a bad unit. She just has so much competition that she has trouble making it out the team comps. Laura is S tier. She's tied for best melee DPS with Maxwell. Just does insane single target damage and doesn't even need TP to do it. And as her health gets lower, she just does more and more damage. Um, she's also tanky when she gets under half health. Um, and she has good AoE damage with Bloody Cross. She can win maps on her own, just by sheer damage. I mean, she can nuke bosses. If you put twofold turn on her, she can absolutely just nuke a boss down, hitting them in the back twice with risky maneuver. Twofold turn is crazy. Then she has lone wolf shenanigans she can do, where she essentially can become a boss unit. So you can run low team unit counts. But even without that, I think she's S tier. Just because of the it's kind of like Frederica levels of damage, but she's also tanky, and she works well with a lot of other units to help boost her damage. Like I said, Benedict, for example, um, really helps her out. Also, the last unit we're going to talk about really helps her out. But even without all that, just the fact that she can risky maneuver every turn for extremely high damage, and as her health gets lower, she just does more and more and more damage. And you can put a res earring on her and safely play her under half health, even on hard mode, where she's just doing extremely high damage due to all her passive abilities. I think she qualifies as S tier. Um, Decimal, I think is D tier. He's I just can't find a reason to use him over other units. Like he's just his abilities are too random. You know, sometimes they're good, like with enemies on elevation, but even then, all his abilities are pretty costly, and they're all just so random that I don't. It's just not my play style. I mean, I can't. Even if I were to give him a little bit of extra credit here, I can't see him being above like C tier. Um, but because we have a D tier, and I do think Decimal is probably the worst unit in the game, I think I'm gonna put him there. Um, Maybe I just need to use him more, but I've never ever felt like he was particularly helpful on any team comp. Um, Giovanna is a good unit. She's situationally good. So Gaia's Roar is incredible in the right on the right maps. And then she has Jellet Barrage, which is pretty good. But she takes a bit of setup to be good. You know, she has to lay down ice, or someone else has to lay down ice for her. Um, or you have to feed her a ton of TP to spam Gaia's Roar. But she's situationally good, so you know I think B tier is fine for her. She has excellent movement. She has excellent bulk as well. She can take hits, um, but she's just a little bit tricky to use sometimes. Whereas a lot of these other units are just a lot easier and also similarly effective. Quahog, you know, there's not much that needs to be said about this guy. He's game breaking. I don't really use him very much just because he is game breaking, but um, he does combo extremely well with Avlora, which is like the one case where I will use him. And the reason for that is you can like stack Benedict's Dragon Shield and a bunch of buffs on her, and just kind of use her very aggressively. And every turn, just rewind time. Oh, and you can stack twofold turn on her too, so she can attack twice every turn, and she does better. She makes better use of twofold turn than most other units. So now she's attacking twice every turn, and you just keep rewinding time, and you can keep doing that over and over again, and it's nutty. And then he has a whole bunch of other shenanigans that most people know about. I'm sure there's even more that people haven't even figured out yet. But it does a lot of cheesy stuff, stopping time, um, unfreezing a unit, having them deal damage to enemies that can't fight back, or stopping time so enemies can't evade, and using like Izana's weapon skill to just nuke the whole map. Um, he can heal, kind of heal with his turn back time. He can restore everybody's ultimates every turn in conjunction with Julio with Inheritor, so that if enemies are within range of where your main units are holding out, you can just keep nuking them every turn, rewinding time and doing it again. Yeah, I don't use him much because he is so broken, but I think he definitely qualifies for SS tier. So that's the list. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Hopefully, we can have a discussion about some of the characters. Maybe I'll learn more about Decimal and use him more. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment or both. Thanks for watching, everybody.